Run With Chestnut.
All right, this is Run With Chestnut, episode 8. Today we're talking about a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Victor Frankel. And today it's a smaller episode than usual. I am joined by one of my buddies, a.k.a. Simon, who's been on pretty much every single episode. Right, Simon?
Yes, hello.
Hello, Simon. So, yeah, I think this is the core. I mean, you know, we gave the book out, whatever, Andrew, Melissa. It's going to be a good one.
Yes.
And I will preface this to say that I read this book first back when I was in high school, and I think I told you that. And I didn't remember much of it, but I remember it making a big impact, you know? So it was very interesting to like revisit it and reread it because it not only reminded me of why I thought it was a big impact, but also just like reminded me of myself when I was in high school. You know what I mean? Like brought back the memory. I don't know if that. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. Go ahead.
What are your as per usual for me? It's my first time.
No, it's good, man. This is good, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to expand. I thought so. Before we get into this book, so for those that don't know, this is a book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's basically a part memoir, part
psychology,
like historical account, part psychological analysis of this theory of psychotherapy, aka logotherapy.
Logo? Largo.
Yeah. I thought logotherapy. Logotherapy.
I thought Largo, like L-A-R-G-O, but maybe I heard wrong.
Logotherapy.
Lago? Okay.
But so yeah, and if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But it's so, but it differentiated this from other books or like documentaries or movies about, you know, World War II and the Holocaust, because I feel like a lot of those accounts were like the purpose of the account was to tell the story of how bad things were.
And it was to tell the horror. I mean? Yeah. He even said in the beginning of the book, this is not meant to tell the horrors of...
exactly. Like this, which is a big difference. Like, I don't think I've read, and it's not like I've read, you know, thousands of books about the Holocaust, but of all the ones I've read, I don't think I've ever read one where the guy literally expressed in the beginning, like, the purpose of this is not to highlight all the bad stories, because like that's not what he's trying to do, right? What he's trying to do is use that as the context to then phrase what he's trying to communicate.
Yes.
Which is basically what the title is, like the search for
meaning. What is the meaning in the experienced? Yeah. And
I thought it was pretty interesting. Like, did you read the introduction?
Yes. The whole suicide thing?
No. So he says in the introduction, he almost published it without his name on it.
Oh, that I read.
Right? Like, he literally wanted no fame or, you know, like, it wasn't about him or his story.
But then he figured that not having his name on it kind of takes a lot out of the book. So he figured. And I found also interesting in the intro, which this part I completely forgot, I guess, from last time I read it, and that he had the opportunity to actually leave the country before all this happened. If you remember, like, he was going to be able to, I think it was the U.S. or London or something. He was going to be able to go somewhere on a visa because he was a doctor. Oh yeah,
but he chose not to go.
Right. Not
to say that, like, he would have. I mean, obviously, this was before he experienced everything.
Right.
But it's interesting to see, like, they knew what was potentially was coming.
Right.
And he chose not to go,
which is pretty remarkably interesting.
Anyway, okay, cool. Let's get into the book. It's divided into different parts. So I guess we can start with. Well, we'll start,
part one
with the first part.
Yeah.
I thought so. He highlights these 3 phases that people go through as they go through these camps, right?
Which are shock.
Go for it. What are they?
Shock, apathy, and psychology after liberation.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, it's basically what it sounds like, right? Like first you go into these camps, you're like complete shock, like you have no idea what's going on. It's just everything is a new stimulus, and then you fall after you get into this routine. It's like you're falling into this apathetic sort of state where it's like you're just, it's not a shock anymore, right? It's just this is your life.
You're completely desensitized to whatever's going on. Like you're detached emotionally.
Like someone's completely wailing on someone else, like right next to you, like you're just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all what matters, he says this like multiple times, all what matters is the preservation of your own life and like your closest friends' lives.
That, and also he said that like some people might even go to desperate lengths to save their own lives, even if it means making sure that a prisoner goes to the gas chamber before they do.
Yeah, which, and we'll get into this a little later, but the whole, like, I thought it was interesting, the whole psychology of the whole, like the capos.
Oh, yes.
Where it's like, these are prisoners, these are, like Jews in the concentration camp themselves, but then given a little bit of authority, they could be potentially more brutal
than the guards,
than the German guards themselves. Like, and we will, but. Yeah, I mean, and I'll preface this to say the whole point of this book, like at the end, he basically he's using this as a manual to say like you need to apply this to your own life, right? To find meaning. So like as we go through this, we'll obviously like pick points and kind of compare it to our own lives.
Yeah,
we're obviously not saying like our problems are a lot less dire than the World War II concentration camp. Like, I mean, I remember the whole like searching for the struggle, and I'm like, what do I like? He's like, well, what, like you need to find what struggle means in your life,
right?
And it's like, okay, like what do I struggle with? I'm thinking like, oh, is it like endurance, like running a marathon or something? And I'm like, wait a second, I need to preface this by saying I completely understand that you choosing to run a marathon is completely different from what this dude went through. Like, we're not saying it's the same thing,
right?
Like, but it's what he's basically telling us to do in the book, right, which is find those things in your life. But anyway, I just, disclaimer on that. Like, yes, we get it. It's not the same thing.
Yes.
But anyway, all right, cool. I thought, so the next thing I got was basically the things that, or the one thing that differentiated people who survived and people who didn't.
Yes.
Like, right. Like, well, and obviously we're not talking about like people who were selected to
but just
to go die,
the sheer willpower.
Exactly. So do you remember like what
Yes. So the people who survived were the people who basically is like asking within themselves, what do I have to look forward to and when I get out of this? And even like they also just appreciate everything around them, even if it means like there's an example of a person like appreciating a tree or appreciating like nature, whereas the people who didn't survive were the people who just gave up hope and didn't like find meaning in what their suffering was bringing them.
Right. And he basically said people needed a reason. People needed a why.
Yes.
Right. They died from lack of hope, not I forgot the names of the diseases, but like they were like typhoid and a couple of things, right? Obviously, yes, you can die from that. You can die from starvation, but like everyone was starving.
Right.
So then the what differentiated the people who died from starvation versus the people who didn't was
the mental willpower.
Like, is the why. Yeah. Which is like coming from someone like him who went through it, who actually was the one who identified. That is, I think, super interesting.
Well, also it's interesting to know that he was a psychiatrist in there. So I mean, it kind of makes sense.
That I actually. So there was a few points throughout this book that I thought about that in the sense that a lot of his discussions in the book, like he almost detaches from the situation and just critically looks at it.
Yeah.
Which is super unusual. I feel like, again, like most renditions or like most of these accounts, people are so like in the moment and describing what's going on.
And they're also just like, it's kind of like about their putting themselves in the situation. So
right. Yeah. Versus he's just like, it's like we're looking down on it with him.
Right. Like he's basically as if it wasn't him that's experiencing, as if he's like maybe watching from afar.
Yes, exactly.
So
exactly, which is again unusual when it comes to these,
Yeah.
It's I mean, damn, dude, like especially the first part of this book, like not the lightest one to get through.
No. You know what I mean? Right. And what? Well, okay, go on.
Well, no, I was gonna say, and I mean, we can dive in. Like, I have some like specific things from the first part.
Yeah. Same.
That I thought were interesting, but let's. I wanted to kind of circle, like, get to the end and then circle back.
Okay.
One thing I found super interesting is the thing that he identifies. So after he tells the story of the camps, right?
Yes.
He walks us through like different studies of university students and this and that, like his work as a psychiatrist working with people
and the statistics of
and the thing he identifies as what leads to people's lack of meaning, or like they have no meaning in life kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's boredom and too much leisure time.
Yeah, that's what I wrote that down. Too much free time and boredom.
Yes. Which, if you think about it,
it makes sense.
Makes absolute sense. Especially so, as we're recording this in the last couple years, there have been some like pretty high profile suicides of different celebrities and singers and things like that, right?
And
there's been like a lot of
we even talked about this before as to
yeah. And there's like a lot of discussion about why, like, these people have millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
Like looking in from, like, they won so many awards and super successful either in like music or business,
right? And
looking in from the outside, it's like, these people have everything. Like, why are you killing it? You know what I mean? Like, from the outside looking in,
right? I mean, but obviously,
ultimately, they had no struggle, right? Like, everything came so easily that they lost the meaning. Like, they couldn't figure out what the meaning of their life was because everything came so easily.
Right.
They had so much leisure time in the sense that anything they wanted, they could just like snap their fingers and they had it.
Right. And
right. Like, what were we gonna say?
I don't remember.
Sorry, okay. But you know, like, it's almost like convenience degrades the struggle that we need to then get meaning, and I'm like the struggle. You know, go ahead.
Right, and obviously, I remember now. We can't obviously go inside their thoughts, but just from looking at it from an outside perspective, that's what it seems like. And I guess in a way, can you kind of say to yourself that? Obviously, I've never felt that need, for suicide. But when you do, for example, do something and then you realize, okay, I'm bored. What's next? Imagine having that boredom for so many years. Like, people like you and I, we're always able to find what's next because we don't really have everything at our fingertips. But like, imagine that feeling of, what do I want to do now? Or,
right. Like, you've done everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I also, I drew another similarity is, I don't know what the statistic is, but basically if you compare someone pre-retirement to post-retirement, the difference in their health is like absolutely mind-bogglingly drastic. You know what I mean? Like, someone who's, say, like, someone retires at 65.
Yeah.
So if you compare their health at like 63 and then you come back to them at like 68 or something.
Right.
And before 65, like, they had a job to go to, they were working towards things. They had, time schedules and all these different like projects, whatever. And then the moment that all ends, all of a sudden they need to find that purpose completely on their own.
Right.
And like, some people thrive, but a lot of people don't. Right. Like,
right.
And
their mental state deteriorates, and that's how people develop Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And I mean, and if you can take a look at a lot of people who haven't retired, like a lot of celebrities who are still like into their 90s.
Right, they keep doing what they're doing.
They
right?
are, and
they're like, yeah, what's his
for example, the Rolling Stones person, but also the producer Norman Lear that wrote All in the Family. He's late into the late 90s, and he's still thriving. So
right, and obviously these are like individual examples we're throwing out, but like it's a trend that I feel like happens enough that you can almost make like people who carry on with, and it doesn't even have to be work. It could be a hobby. Like maybe,
right.
You're just like you're an insane fisherman or something.
Yes.
And you just love to fish and you're out on the sea every day. Like just having finding something that you think is worth struggling for, and then struggling for it.
Right.
Like gives purpose.
Yes.
Right. And it's just like, I don't know, like hearing it, like it's stuff we talked about in the past, but then hearing it framed in this perspective also it's just,
And I mean, there are people, for example, there's one example in the book that he gives of these women in his group session where I think he says to one woman, if you look back at your life when you're 80 or something, how would you view it? And then this woman is like, well, when I'm 80, and if I would look back at my life, I'd probably say, well, I made money, I flirted with this person, that my life wasn't really meaningful. And then he has this other woman. This other woman says, well, I made a better life for my son. I don't remember what the exact thing was, but basically she struggled to be a better human being and make a better life for her son, and that was her purpose. So it's just like finding the meaning of life in terms of when you look back at it, it wasn't meaningful or not.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I remember that example. No, it's cool. And then he brings up this phrase, tragic optimism. Do you remember that? Where it's basically like, well, he talks about suffering, right? And he talks about how like suffering's not a requirement, but it definitely
helps.
Like finding meaning through suffering.
You could. Yeah.
It's basically finding something that's worth suffering for.
Right.
Not to say that you have to suffer through it or struggle through it, but like it's something that you would do it for.
Right.
Right. So then he has this thing called tragic optimism, where it's like they were telling stories about like making jokes as they were like going on forced marches and things like that.
Yeah. Like they're
just having like just positivity.
Even talking about like what foods they would prepare and stuff like that. Yes.
Yeah. And it's, and then again, he like brings up all these studies and like university studies and things that just point to that connection between struggle and suffering, and then contentment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, man, it's it's good. And then I think after, like, I guess the next part of that, right before the ending, is this idea of collective guilt.
Oh yeah.
And it's basically like he makes this example. Can you hear that doorbell?
Yes.
I hope it's so. Side note. Well, okay, never mind. Side note. That's not important. Anyway, that's how you guys know it's live, right?
Yeah.
Collective guilt basically is this idea of judging an entire group, right? Whether it's like a group drawn across any line, whether it's racial or ethnic or like from a specific nationality, right, or party, like political party, drawing them with a stereotypical broad brush, right. And the examples he gives is like he's giving a talk somewhere. This is like obviously like afterwards. This is after World War II. And he's giving the talk in German, and this lady walks up and is like, how can you speak the language of the enemy?
How can you write the language? Yeah.
Was it right?
Yeah. How can you write a book? And then he's like, well, if you have a kitchen knife, how can you use a knife that a murderer used to stab someone? Or
exactly. Yeah. Which I mean, he kind of like, what is it? Like reducto ad absurdum, right? Like it's basically, you cannot, which I think that's even more poignant like today.
It is
in today's climate, where it's like you cannot, like, two things. First, you cannot judge an entire group, right? And we say group as in like a group of society.
Yes.
Just from the actions of a few.
Yeah.
And secondly, you cannot assume that again, like all of the things about that, right? Like,
right.
It's just,
I mean, honestly, unfortunately, it's still happening right now, as we can see. So,
yeah. So, and that basically takes us to the end. And I thought that's a very relevant way that he ends. Well, he didn't end the book on that note, but like it's towards the end, and I feel like it's very relevant because I feel like anytime people read this book, whether it was when he wrote it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even now, there's always going to be like groups, right? Social groups,
right?
And there'll always be judgments and stereotypes, and so to end it on that note where it's like you cannot have these broad judgments, it's like, unfortunately, that's always going to be relevant.
Yeah.
Right, which we're finding like right now, like we can see that, and it's like, okay, cool, okay, well, not cool, but you understand.
Yeah.
Let's circle back around a little bit, and the way this book starts. So, like I mentioned, I read this book in high school. Right, this was years ago, and when I picked this book up again, I read the first like page. And I was completely reminded. I was like, "Oh my God, this is why I connected so much with this book." Like it got shoved in my face immediately.
Right. By the way, did you read it for class or?
I did. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think the name of the class was, I don't remember if it's the name of the class or if it was just the name of a reading, but something like "Existentialism is a Humanism."
Okay.
It was a class where we examined a lot of things regarding existence and meaning and things like that.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah, very, very cool.
Was
class.
Like philosophy?
Yes. Well, it was it was an English class.
Oh, okay.
But the types of things we read was that. Yeah, I don't think I had philosophy in high school.
Okay.
It would have. I mean, it's basically a philosophy class, right?
Right.
Like we read about Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre and all that stuff. I also this dude quotes. So I wrote down 2 Nietzsche quotes.
Oh, okay.
Which we'll go over later. And Dostoevsky he quotes I think a few times. Like, and he talks about like where like because like Freud, right? Sigmund Freud is like the guy that sort of he built or like is a contributor, right? Like his logotherapy kind of builds off of part of Sigmund Freud's, except like Freud was from like human sexuality. Logotherapy is not really based on that more existence, but anyway, we'll get to that. But anyways, the thing that I read on the first page of this book that completely reminded me of why I connected so much with it, and I think I told you this. I texted you the moment I read this. He's like, the suicide thing. Yeah. He's like, I'm talking to my patients, and he's like, I'm a psychiatrist. I talk to my patients, and sometimes when I'm trying to figure out why they don't kill them, like why they don't. Or why they want to commit suicide, I asked them to tell me, why don't you commit suicide? Like, why do you? And I feel like that's such a oh man, like I don't know, it just brought me back. You know what I mean? Like the types of discussions.
You wouldn't think their therapist would ever ask that, but
no, like, well, why don't you go kill yourself right now? Like, what's stopping you?
Yeah.
Like, but it's such an important thing, and I actually found myself like sitting there, like thinking, like just about like personally, like, why don't I do it? You know what I mean? Just it's a good check-in for anyone to do. Just like think about why don't you?
Right.
It's just super interesting. I don't know. What did you think?
I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah, same as you. I thought that was like, I'm kind of thinking like, I wonder if people should apply this method more, especially, I don't think it's really applied here in the States. But I feel like it should, because then it forced a person to stop and go like, why haven't I? So.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing that I found notable was, so he lays out basically the whole hierarchy of the camp. So you had like prisoners at the bottom, and then these capos, right? Like, which we talked about a little before.
Right.
But basically these who, like, they themselves were like imprisoned Jews at these camps, but then they had a bit of authority given to them by these SS, like not, Germans.
Right.
And the sort of the interaction between them
and the prisoners.
I mean, and and they're basically like, you know, like you would think that they would be more sympathetic to the prisoners, seeing as they are one.
Right.
But in many cases, as we just, you know, as we said before, it's like these people were not like across the board, but a lot of them were pretty rough, you know?
Well, I kind of have a feeling that it kind of goes back to the fact that these people are prisoners. They're going to do whatever it takes to survive, even if it means being brutal to one of their own. Because if the Germans or the guards see that they're being brutal, I think...
Right, they're going to stay in favor.
Right, yes.
Which, again, like shows like... I mean, it's easy to say now, right? It's easy to condemn them and be like, oh, like I would never turn on my friends like that or blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But like, until you're in that situation,
never know.
you have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, until you're like tested in that way. One thing I thought, so this kind of goes back to him being like super analytical at times, like, you know, like being kind of objective, is he notices that the certain things that you would not think would be true will be, well, for example, he I think he calls them like surprising observations, where it's like people who are like these prisoners aren't cleaning their teeth, right? But they have they have like no gum issues. They're like their teeth are clean. Like sleepers who like normally, like if you can't fall asleep, if there's someone like making a little bit of noise
they end up falling
in the other room. Yeah, they're like pressed up against someone snoring like a bear, and they're like falling asleep completely.
Yeah.
And first of all, I thought it was interesting that he noticed that, right? And I feel like that's his sort of analytical brain just analyzing a lot of things.
Yeah, but then I feel like he'd notice a lot of things if you're in that situation, because you really have nothing else to do.
Well, then why aren't all the accounts of the Holocaust? You know what I mean? Like, I've never heard that from anyone.
That's true. That's true.
Except for the fact that, like, oh, we were so tired, we just fell asleep and did it. You know what I mean? But the fact that he noticed, like, the teeth thing.
Right, right.
Like, it's partially his doctor brain, partially his just, like, observing, you know? And he has this, I think this is his first Dostoevsky quote, where it's basically, a man can get used to almost anything given the proper why, or something along those lines. Or not even given the proper why, just a man can get used to almost anything. Yeah. Just saying how like adaptable humans are.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay. The next thing that I kind of took note with is this guy was having a nightmare, and he was about to wake him up from this nightmare, and then he stopped himself and he was like, wait a second. There's not a nightmare that he could be having that's worse than what's going on in real life right now. Yeah. I don't know why that sort of stuck with me, but like I wrote it down as I was reading it, just thinking like, it's, you know what I mean? Like,
I remember that part, but it didn't really connect with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing this is probably going to go into like a bigger idea. So
go ahead.
But my favorite idea that he has is everything can be taken away from you, but your attitude and how you...
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like you could be reduced to pretty much the most minimal level of humanity, like human existence.
Right. You can pretty much...
But the one thing the one thing you can always control is how you choose to view it, right? Which is super interesting. It kind of reminds me of how they were talking about, like, in the middle of, like, a work detail, they'd stop to watch a sunset.
Yes.
Or, like, they had these little cabaret things, I think they call it,
in the camps. Yeah.
Yeah, the performances where, like, the dude would get up and sing Italian arias and, like, tell jokes. And
some people would even do that rather than go eat their food, which I...
Just say that one more time?
Yeah, he even said that, like, some people would prefer to watch that than... over their food.
Yeah, exactly. And then how there was like one guy, the one capo, I think they call like the murderous capo.
Yes.
Who would always come around and they'd be like, hey, read your poetry. And they'd like applaud really loudly just to like get favor with him.
Right.
Even though it was apparently awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's I think all just gets summed up in. I mean, again, the title is "Man's Search for Meaning," right? So
right.
I feel like he's always sort of interjecting these. He doesn't. I mean, the first half is just him like telling this narrative, and it's almost like setting the context of what he then lays out later on. Yes. But even through that narrative, he's basically laying out like it's not really about us. It's about what life expects from us.
Yes.
Right. It's about the exterior, right? It's not about us. It's not like a selfish thing. It's almost a selfless thing.
Right.
When it comes to life. Yeah, man, I don't know. It's just it's a good read, especially if you're willing to take it slowly and just kind of think through some things.
Right.
You know, and it just calling into question. I mean, I remember when I was first going through this in high school, the idea of suffering and just personal suffering came up so much.
Really?
Because not the act of suffering, but the idea of it.
Right.
And just being like what's the use of it?
Yeah.
Right? Especially if we have the power to get out of it, then what's the use? Like, I don't know. I feel like that's such a complex topic that you can like get lost in, you know?
Right.
I don't know. Any thoughts about anything?
No, I think you pretty much summed it up. No.
I'll lay out one of my favorite quotes from Nietzsche, which is, "That which does not kill me will make me stronger."
Yes.
And I feel like that's said in a lot of different places, but I feel like most people don't know where it comes from.
How do you think you'd go about this in your own life?
What do you mean?
I mean, like how would you try to apply this book into your own life? Anything that you would...
Oh, just like takeaways and stuff?
Yeah.
I would say, well, two things. The first thing would be kind of what he lays out at the end, which is about the, I forgot
judging.
What he calls it, but yeah, the judging, basically not judging
groups,
an entire group by the actions of a few.
Yeah. I mean, we're all...
Which again, he uses that. He used the example is basically, he talks about this SS, this Nazi commander of the camp, who
gave him
and
was nice
he bought like a bunch of medicine for the prisoners and things like that, and now this isn't like a moral thing like, oh, he should have done more, like okay, yes, everyone could have done more, but the point is to say this German Nazi commander showed more kindness than the capo, the Jewish concentration camp prisoner who was a capo who worked under that German commander, who did like a lot of bad things. Like he's just to illustrate his point, Victor Frankel's point of saying, you cannot judge someone just because they belong to the group. Right. Like that the capo was a Jew, the German guy was a Nazi, yet they acted contrary to what the broad population of their group would have acted.
Yep.
So probably that's one, and then two would be just trying to figure out. So his whole thing is find your why, right? Like find the why that makes your life worth living.
Yeah.
And that makes the suffering that you're willing to endure suffering to get the why. So it's always just trying to figure out what that why is.
And just expanding on that why, and like once you figure out, well, basically, if you ever are suffering, it's like, I think kind of the thing is how am I going to choose to handle it? Like for example, this pandemic we're in, like how am I going to choose to handle being in quarantine? Am I going to just sit all day, watch, like do this, or am I going and complain about it, or am I going to try to take away what I can and do what I can to make my life better? So,
right, because it's all about, you always have the power to choose your outlook.
Yes.
Right, which is what he highlights. No, I think that's good, and it's I think it's always relevant, but I think it's especially relevant now. And I mean, it's almost. I like how little he puts himself, how little he makes this book about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As much as, like, if you looked at the genre of this book, it'd probably be called, like, a memoir.
It would, probably. I mean, it'd probably be both in, like, psychology / memoirs or something like that. I think.
Right, but, it would for sure be, like, in the memoir. Like,
it would be.
That would be one of the genres. Yes. But it's almost completely not. Because it's not, his point is not to tell his story. It's the point is to use his story to illustrate what he's trying to say.
Yes.
Right. And I don't know why, like, I'm stuck on that, but it's just
right.
Maybe it's because most memoirs are completely opposite of that. You know?
Yeah.
Most memoirs are about, like, me, which, like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That's why you read someone's memoir, right? Because you want to know about them.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. What are your, I mean, any thoughts? I'm trying to look through my notes. I guess the only thing that we didn't touch on, which I thought was notable, was basically after they were all released and given freedom,
like how they viewed, right?
They basically had this, like, really rough transition time
to, like,
where they didn't feel pleased, right? They almost, they needed to relearn what freedom was,
right?
And he brings up this story of, like, he's walking through this field with his buddy.
Yes.
And his buddy's, like, walking along these oat plants and like vandalizing them or, like, picking or, like, killing, stepping on them or something.
Right.
And he's basically like, no, man, don't do that. Like, you're going to mess up the harvest. And he's like, like, all the horrible things that these people, as in the Germans, did to us. And you want me to, like, care about a few oat plants.
Right.
Right. Like, and he's like,
don't be wrong to people just because they've done wrong to you or something like that.
Exactly. No one has a right to do wrong, even if wrong has been done on them.
That's such a, like, I mean, it seems kind of, I would say, I don't want to say obvious, but it seems like a concept that would make sense, but yet I can only imagine how many people probably follow that concept, right?
Exactly, which, and thinking on it now, it's like, that's the right thing, right? Like, the last thing that the world needed at that time is another war.
Right.
Right? With, like, the people who were in the camps rising up and murdering all the like the last thing people needed was more death. But, like, I'm sure a lot of people, like, and I get it, right? Like, you want to get revenge.
Right.
Right? You want to pay them back. And it's like, even, like, boiling it down to the most simple, like, someone walks up to you on the street and, like, hits you. You're going to, you know what I mean? Like, you want to hit him back.
Yeah.
But, like, his point is, like, you don't have the right to do this wrong, even if they did this wrong to you first, right?
Which I will have to admit, like, even for me, that can be a little hard to accept. I mean, I get the concept, and obviously I strive to achieve that, but I could still say, like, a primal instinct could sometimes be to get angry and get back, you know?
100%. And I don't think he's saying don't fight back, right? I don't think that's his point. I think his point is just understand when you should. Like, there's a time and a place, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought that was like, I that thing about the oat plants, like, I took note of that, wrote it down.
Yeah.
Cool. I would say the last question for you, Simon, is one of the things he points out that we've talked about is basically finding, like, the idea of finding struggle. Yes. Right. Finding, like, and I remember I was listening, I don't remember what it was another podcast. It might have been like a Joe Rogan episode or something, where it was right after a pretty well-known singer committed suicide.
From, what's his face? What's the band? I can't remember. Soundgarden. Chris Cornell.
Exactly.
Chris Cornell.
It might have been. I don't. Let me.
Was it the interview with Jocko as to Jocko Willink? Was it?
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Not 100% sure. Maybe. But anyway, the point is that in that episode, they were basically talking about they weren't saying anything specifically about the guy, but just in general, the necessity of finding struggle.
Yes.
So then that obviously got me to think like, okay, like how does that relate to my life? Right. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I came to the conclusion of is that, like, for those who don't know,
we're both,
like, I love racing, endurance racing. I think one reason why I like endurance racing, like long distance, obviously I love the sprint stuff, which is what I do like competitively. Right. But I love pushing longer and longer distances because it's almost like trying to find
how far you
the
can
limit.
go.
Yeah, the limit of your capacity to volunteer for struggle. And that thing about volunteer, that's important, I think, because none of these things are things that we are subjected to.
Right.
Like when we sign up to do like a 18-hour thing, it's 100% volunteer. You could quit anytime you want to do.
You could, yeah.
But like, why do we choose to do it? And I think there's something there that relates.
Right.
I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So,
any takeaways? Any?
Well, what's your question though?
Just in general, like that's something I realized about myself is that I think one thing that draws me towards those sort of longer events is finding that struggle and trying to like feel it and embrace it and learn it,
Well, for me, it's more about the fun aspect. I do these races for fun. I'm still looking for like a lot of things I do are for fun. I'm still looking for like what makes me struggle or what I want to struggle for. So I'm still trying to achieve that. And not to say that these things that I do don't make me struggle, but I don't know if that's my primary purpose of doing it.
Right. And I will say, obviously I have I have so much fun when I do these races.
Right.
In general. But like, if you're there and you're just trying to plow, I remember like the first marathon I ever did, and the more you do them, like the easier they get, definitely. But like the first marathon was super hard. It was like 4 or 5 months into me starting to run. Period. Like there's a lot of things I did wrong about it, but anyway, I just remember like going through it, and like 3 hours in or something, I just like there were places reached in my head that I had like never been to before.
Oh,
like I was wishing that my Achilles tendon would like rip, or like my leg would, like I literally was wishing for a reason to stop. Like it was absolutely, it was not fun in the moment.
When I did my first half marathon, I kind of almost felt that way. Like I'm just like, I wanted to die.
And I think the more you push that out and the more you test those limits, the more you're forced to question those things.
And then, then that being said, I'm still deciding to do a marathon after that. So,
well, yeah, so are we all. You know what I mean? But like for example, like after marathon, like I've done a bunch of marathons. Next thing maybe it'll be like a 50-mile race and a 75, then 100. Like a 100-mile race is insane. But like I'm definitely want to do one in my life.
Right.
Why do I want to do it? Not because I think it'll be fun. I think it's just like morbid curiosity to just push your body.
Yes.
And I think it's, that's what it is.
Yeah. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is something I've always wanted to try. Now, why do people find a struggle in?
I think it's different. Because in that sense, you're struggling against someone else.
You are. You're not. Yeah.
And it doesn't last as long.
Right.
A Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match doesn't last, 15, 20 hours. Like,
right.
I think it's, obviously it's different to everyone.
Yeah.
But like in my head, it's different in the sense that in, say, like a running race.
Yeah.
It's just you.
Right.
You can't blame it like, oh, my opponent was good, that's why I lost, or like, oh, my opponent was easy, that's why I was able to win. Like, it's just you.
Yeah.
And the only thing stopping you from finishing is your mindset and your willingness to give up. Like,
right.
That's why I like endurance races, because it's like it just there's no barrier. It's literally just you.
Right.
You can't hide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in that, because I remember in that, if that's what you're talking about in that interview, that's what they were talking about. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as an example.
Oh, definitely.
So I was just wondering what the struggle is there. I mean, you are struggling against someone else, but you are right. Like with an endurance race, there's
I think it's just different. Not to say one's better than the other.
Right.
I think it's just different types of struggle, and I think people should experience both.
Right.
Not just one, you know.
Which I'm hoping to do once this whole
thing I know, right? It's kind of hard to socially distance a jiu-jitsu match where you literally
have to be
the point of it. Yeah, right. The point of it is to be like literally hugging the other person.
Yeah. So I wonder how they're gonna. Well, I guess until vaccine, they're not gonna. You know. So that's something to look forward to.
Or they might with like. I mean, if you're wearing them, I have no idea, dude. I have no idea. I have no idea.
No one knows.
Yeah, man, super interesting.
Yeah.
But those are my two takeaways from this book. I'm very happy we revisited this. I was reminded about so many things from high school.
Nice.
You know, there's actually a few other ones from high school that I might. Well, we'll discuss.
Yeah. Well.
But anyway, cool. Good book.
Yeah, I really liked it.
What's your? I mean, I hate to give this kind of book a rating.
I can't rate it. I hate giving ratings too.
Honestly, like I think this is the first time that I've ever given this. Oh, dude, we didn't rate the last one.
Which one?
The Extreme Ownership.
Oh, that's right.
I don't think we rated it. Okay, we'll revisit that at some point.
Okay.
But so not counting that book, I think this is the first book I'm going to give a 5 out of 5. And the reason for that is because it checks so many boxes for me. You know, it has whatever, like of all the reasons we talked about, I don't need to like go,
right,
you know, blab them out again. For all the reasons we talked about. And it's a book that I would pick up more than once, which I think like a lot of good books count as 4 stars. But if I'm only going to read it once, like it's not a 5, you know?
Right.
I would say this is, like a 5.
No pressure. I'm really bad at rating it, but I'm really bad at rating in general. Yeah. But I'd say 5 out of 5 too. Because I thought it was a really good book.
It's good. I feel like it's especially for like not kids, but like younger people to read. It's good and it breaks the monotony of all the. I mean, I don't. Maybe that's the wrong word, but
I don't know. I mean, high school kids reading it. I mean, I know you read it in high school. I feel like it'd take a certain type of kid to read it, though. I don't know.
I think it would take a certain type of teacher to present it to the class in the right way.
That's true. I was picturing it as a kid reading it on his own, but yeah, you're right.
Right. No, I think with a specific, and I think it was like junior. It wasn't like I was a freshman. I was like junior year or something, or something. I read it, and I think it would take a specific type of teacher who would like be able to ask the right question, start the right discussions, like just frame it in the right way,
Yeah, because I cannot picture an average high school kid picking up this book and saying, I want to read it.
Yeah, or even like getting stuff out of it like getting all of it that they could out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it takes it. You need some analysis. All right, cool.
All
right. Well, anything else to add?
No.
All right, cool, man. Well, guys, this was Man's Search for Meaning by Victor Frankel.
Yeah.
Probably I'm trying to look for a word here. Not the hardest, but definitely like the darkest book we've read so far.
Yeah, I mean,
you would say there's another one?
It's deep. I wouldn't say it's dark. It's deep. I mean,
especially the first half.
I know, but like Extreme Ownership, that talked about military and it gave examples of combat. I mean,
I wouldn't put those two things together.
No, but I don't know. Yes, it's dark, but anyway.
All right. Well, we'll agree to disagree. But anyway, deep, thought-provoking book.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. That's about it. Till next time. See you guys later.
See you guys later.
All right. Good stuff. Peace.